Welcome to the Cyber Business Podcast, where we feature top founders and entrepreneurs and share their inspiring stories. Now, let's get started with the show.
Matthew Connor here, host of the Cyber Business Podcast. Today, we're joined by Carol Smith, CIO at DePauw University. Carol, welcome to the show.
Hey, thanks, Matthew. I'm glad to be here.
Glad to have you. Before we get too far in, a quick word from our sponsors. This episode is brought to you by cyberlinks.com. That's cyberlynx.com. Do you know if a hacker's in your system? Most people and most companies don't until it's too late and the hacker's already done damage. A hacker's job is to bypass your security, so companies need a way of knowing when someone's gotten past their security. That's where Cyberlinks comes in. We partnered with the best cybersecurity companies in the world to be able to provide our clients with the best solutions at the best price. So whether it's managed SIEM, SOC, EDR, MDR, XDR, you name it, we'll help you find the best solution at the best price. Find out more at cyberlinks.com. That's cyberlynx.com. And now back to our show. Carol, for those who aren't familiar, can you tell us about DePauw and your role there as CIO?
Sure. Thanks, Matt. So DePauw University is a small private liberal arts college in Greencastle, Indiana. So we're about 50 miles west of Indianapolis. We have about 1,900 students, are completely residential. It's a residential institution, and we have three schools. We've got the College of Liberal Arts and Sciences. We have our School of Business and Leadership, and our new school, the Creative School, which is kind of an interesting compilation of different types of disciplines around thinking about thinking critically and creatively across different disciplines. So it's a great place to be. I've been here in this role for a number of years, and I've been at the institution for nearly 31 years.
That is a heck of a tenure there, 30 years. So that speaks volumes. Obviously a pretty nice place, so you wouldn't stick around. One of the things that I think is really fascinating, we've had some other guests on that I think you're familiar with, like Shane from Center University. And I think one of the things that always strikes me as really kind of fascinating and kind of inspirational is that how the smaller, colleges kind of pull together in communities to kind of help each other out. And it's kind of really inspiring. Can you tell us about what you guys are doing?
Yeah, that's absolutely right. I mean, I know my experience. You said I've had a long tenure here at the institution, and I think that's in part because it's so interesting to be in higher ed and in IT in higher ed. I mean, just because, both of those things are always evolving. And so it just kind of gives you something fresh and new every year. There's a new set of students, and every year there's a whole new set of challenges and things to be able to put together to support our students so that they can succeed. And one of the things over time that, I recognize being at a smaller institution, you often have a lean team, resources are very, fixed. But at the same time, you're running the same sort of an environment and business for your students as a very large institution would. And so it's that challenge of trying to do the same level of service, providing the same sort of expectations around innovation. And my experience I found early on, I had a mentor who sort of pushed me into it and said, this is how you make this work, is you reach out to those peers, because I found that the higher ed IT world, the people in my peer set, we're all so willing to share our stories with one another, right? Our learning moments, our successes, our challenges, and that enables us to sort of lift all of our ships by not having to solve everything ourselves. And so I know just on a personal level, I think that's been really instrumental for me to help me. It's one of those inspirations that's enabled me to stay so long in higher education, because not only are you working at a really great institution, you're also in this environment of other people who care a lot about it and become your friends and colleagues over many years. And so I think that on a personal level, it's been very, very helpful. It's something I would, encourage others to remember as they're doing this sort of work. At the same time, I think it's also so critical for all of our institutions to be able to work together across our sectors, across our institutions, to find the solutions together so that we can meet those expectations.
Yeah. I mean, I think it's really interesting because I keep reading about how we find out that longevity in terms of like humans, community becomes such an important factor there, right? If people start feeling isolated and alone, their life expectancy decreases. Yet those that have found community and friendships and stuff that support them, they tend to live much longer. So I think that's really interesting. And then as I can't help but think that you're there in that role, right, for 30 years. That's a nice long stint. And I can't help but think that that having that community there, as you said, kind of helps support that and makes it to where you're not alone on the island. Because as CIO, right, you're at the top. There's not a lot of necessarily support, like support. I mean, I'm sure that you can get support from the rest of the administration and from your staff, but it's not quite the same. Having that support from other CIOs who have shared experiences and trials and tribulations, and so that you don't have to necessarily learn the hard way, has got to be a huge benefit and make things, your job so much more enjoyable because you're not having to learn everything the hard way.
Yeah, I love that, making that analogy and that bridge between your actual lifespan and then your lifespan at an organization. I hadn't really thought of it that way, but I think you have something there. Yeah, and I love the fact that you find that those individuals. So I'm going to make a broad statement that's probably, I can't prove it analytically or quantitatively, but you often find that there are people who are in these kinds of roles who do gravitate towards that sort of social connection in their role, that gives them resources and gives them that framework of meaning. It kind of adds to that value. Your core value of why are you working in a particular type of industry. And in higher education, so many times you have opportunity, you talk to people and they're like, yes, I work in IT, or yes, I work in facilities management, or I work in the business office. And you talk a little bit longer and you realize, and they really care about higher education. It's not just a vocation. It's like you find that value around the type of work that you're doing and why you're there, that adds that extra piece to your why. And I think that community is something that, again, it's been really important to me, and it took me a while to really recognize. It was happening, and one day I realized this is why I really love this. It's because I have these other people too. They're like siblings and cousins, who live elsewhere. The other thing that you mentioned too struck me, because you're right, especially when you get into the the more senior level you get into your role at a smaller organization in particular, the less likely are that you're going to have someone else who's doing the same work you're doing in that role as a peer, right? So I have peers like for many years, and still am very good friends with, like, the dean of our library, who is a peer set in a different role on our campus. And so we could have that conversation across at that same level together. But that's unique to be able to find that in a small institution, because sometimes you're just, you just can't always kind of let yourself share all of your concerns, warts and all, in that way. I mean, you hope you can, but you also are trying to, kind of maintain a sense of level of where am I and how much should I share and how much should I not share. And so being able to go find those peers elsewhere, connections are really helpful on a personal level.
I think that's a really brilliant insight, because I think that professional image that you have to maintain, right? There's a certain level of professionalism, and you have to grapple with, well, how much do I share? You can't treat your peers necessarily as your therapist, right? Whereas where you have a peer group of other CIOs, and now everybody can, you can have that safe space, if you will, where everybody can feel comfortable, kind of being completely open and expressing things, fears and worries and whatever, and not having to worry about, well, will this reflect poorly on me, or what will that, impact my reputation at the college. So no, I think that's really fascinating. So for those people who maybe aren't already in a peer group, what would your recommendation be as to like where could they start? What are some that you really enjoy and have gotten benefit from?
Yeah, that's a good question to ask, and I appreciate that. I mean, one that comes to mind immediately is EDUCAUSE. EDUCAUSE is as you I'm sure you're aware is like I consider it the professional organization for people in higher education IT, and they often offer a number of workshops. Programs for people who are aspiring to different levels within their organization. And there's different variants on that. One thing that, I've been involved in my early career, I was involved in some of the as participants in those workshops. So they were leadership workshops, and those were very valuable because it gave you opportunity to what I love about going to something like AgileCause is it gets you out of your bubble of being in the same size school.
Yeah.
So for your institution, if you think about it, you really, you need to understand how to do something at a small scale college if that's where you're working, but you also need to be aware of what's happening in the industry in general because you can't be working with your blinders on. And so going into something larger like an EDUCAUSE workshop has been really helpful and can be because you're working with peers across all different sizes and types of institutions. So you're making connections not just with people like yourself, but people from other kinds of schools. And it gives you that bigger dynamic and you just get a larger net.
Yeah.
And so I that's been something that's been really instrumental to me over the course of my years. And I've had the opportunity to sort of turn that around. I've been, on the faculty side of some of those, or on the mentor, they also have a mentoring program where you can join, and there's a series of structured activities that you do through the leadership mentoring program, and you have a mentor as well. And so again, it gives you opportunities to connect with people that you might not have met otherwise, and that begins to help you bridge your larger network and bring those ideas back to your institution because you're seeing things that others are doing that you might not have thought of yourself. So
That's really interesting. You don't often think of, a CIO, looking for or needing, a mentor, right? That seems to be maybe being a mentor. But I really like that idea of, kind of having that because there's always somebody who's, kind of had more experience in something, we've got something to learn from everyone, I believe. And so I think that's a really interesting take on it because you don't often see that kind of at that level. I think that's really kind of brilliant.
yeah, and I think we all have fear. I mean, we all have questions. We all have things that we want to talk about, and that, a mentor relationship has various variants of what it might look like, and it's a personal, right? It's that moment in time. It's like, what does it mean for me and you to be mentor and mentee together? Sometimes it's not really all that hierarchical. It's more about you're having conversations as two professionals together and sharing
Yeah.
ideas and experience. And so, yeah, I think anytime you can have an opportunity where you could do that is going to be helpful.
Oh, that's fantastic. And so, okay, that's one of them. Well, what are some others that you might recommend?
So, the other thing, kind of shifting a little bit more from an institutional, do you mind if I shift a little bit
Please, wherever
from
you'd like.
me to
Let's do it.
just thinking about the other thing that I've had a lot of opportunity that I really appreciate to be involved with is thinking about how communities of practice in higher education can can basically create opportunities more at the organizational and institutional level to build relationships with, say, higher education and vendors or product providers.
Mm.
An example of that I'm thinking about is I've been really fortunate to be heavily involved in an organization called HESS, the HESS Consortium, which is let's see if I can say it right, the Higher Education Systems and Services Consortium, which is an organization whose underlying goal is two things, and one is to build relationships between small private colleges and the major ERP vendors so that we can create like a common voice with a particular vendor's
Yeah.
organizations and clients to be able to have dialogue with them. We started off with ultimately trying to find a way that we could can't contain costs for small colleges because
Right.
those are, the ERP is a huge cost for any organization, and trying to build that relationship with our vendor partners so that we could help them understand where our concerns are about cost, give them a platform so that they could talk to us together. So rather than talking to 8 different schools about something, they could talk to a voice that's representing 8 schools or 20 schools or 100 schools, and being able to have dialogue that could help shape our needs, understand what their needs are, and build ways to help mutually together for the benefit of higher education. So that's one thing that HESS is all about. It's about, pricing and dialogue and engaging with our vendor partners. And the second part is the community of practice. So building opportunities for institutions to be able to work together around certain problems and challenges that they have in order to, ultimately, be a sounding board, be a place for people to ask questions, look for opportunities where we might have shared services. Having institutions sharing a payroll clerk instead of having 5 different payroll clerks, those sorts of things. And so I think institutions and organizations like that are also really important for higher education. They're beyond the me, they're about the organization, about higher education in general.
Yeah, that's a huge one. I think, being able to kind of pull together and collectively and not necessarily have, that kind of negotiating power, but in a way, it is right. The larger companies get better deals because they're buying in, larger quantities. And so to be able to do that for, smaller education, that's a huge victory right there. I mean, because some of this stuff it's not cheap, as you said. ERP's not it's not inexpensive. Cybersecurity products and services they're not inexpensive. They're needed, but anywhere you can find cost savings like that, I think that's really a brilliant idea. Fantastic.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's been something we've been in HESS in particular. We've just been so thrilled. I mean, I think HESS. I think we're about 8 years old. I can never remember exactly how long ago, but we started off with like 6 schools with this idea, and now there's over 400 institutions that are members of this organization because of that value. And you're right, it isn't just ERPs, it's cybersecurity, it's all of these sort of major there's 2 parts to the cost. There's the cost to the product, okay, and that the subscription cost that's always a substantial piece, but it's also the cost and the resources that it takes to actually use the product and use it well. And something that has been very important and sort of and a core value at our organization, at our institution here at DePauw, and something that we also talk quite a bit about in HESS and other places, is thinking about when we think about how we're using things, how we're doing things with business processes, is doing that in ways we're adopting standardized practices where we can. So we're not always doing things, you know, in your own idiosyncratic way at your institution, because you always have. You're looking for ways to be more efficient in what you're doing where you can, so that you can reduce costs in that way, so you can focus the resources that you do have back on the student experience where it really belongs.
Yeah, and that's really hard to do on your own, right? It just is nearly impossible. I mean, it takes so much more research, and when you're doing it kind of on an island, it becomes really challenging. And so I love this idea of communities pulling together, for bargaining power, for enhanced education. There's just so many great obvious benefits there. It's just it's such a great idea. I'm really glad that. So let's dive into communities a little bit. I know we have been, but I think I love this idea, and I think that for people who kind of it's interesting because I think on the tech side of it, and I know CIOs tend to take one of two paths, right? They're either the very techie person who kind of moved up the ranks, or they're much more the business leader, strategic thinker who understands the big kind of pieces involved and how to maneuver them. And so I think interestingly, the kind of tech oriented people tend to be more of the I'll figure it out on my own type. And I think I think, and I could be wrong. I'm kind of curious your take on this. I think they tend to be more of not engaging in the community idea as much as those people who are more of the kind of people oriented, processes oriented, kind of the more the business focused leaders than the technical leaders, if you will. Do you think would you say that's fair and accurate, or just a crazy generalization that I came up with out of nowhere?
I don't think it's a crazy generalization. I think in some ways, yeah, I think you're right. I think that that could be the case. Um, I'm thinking about an analogy to that a bit I've seen. And I'm not going to say it happens in every case, but it's not uncommon when you see an institution bring on a new CIO who maybe comes from industry outside of higher education. And I think about how often it is that, we work to those of us who have a community already and there's an institution that has a new CIO, we're always like, okay, let's go and let's talk to that person and make sure we get them get them talking to our group. Because not every time, but often if you've been outside of higher ed, you're not as familiar with that community. You're not as familiar with working in that community. And so they may tend to not be as collaborative yet because they don't really realize that A, you're in higher ed, you have to be. You're not competing in that direction anymore. It's okay to be. And B, we're here. And this is the way we're working together. And we want you to help us and we can help you. That doesn't always translate to whether they're a techie or a strategic necessarily. But I think my analogy to what you described is more a matter of where you were. And so if you were working in a for-profit and it was a very competitive for-profit, obviously you're not going to be calling the competitor down the road to ask you how to fix your tech
Yeah.
problem. You're going to be independent on your own. And your strategic might be different depending on how your organization may hire somebody who they want somebody who is that tech person because that's the role they need somebody to do in the CIO role.
Yeah.
And they want you to be strategic in that piece, but you're not necessarily thinking as much about the business level, whereas other organizations kind of embrace it in a broader way. They go, yes, you have tech as part of your portfolio, and we want you in higher ed, you have to go, and you're educating students, and that's not tech, that's educating students. And you're working with faculty, that's not tech. That's working with faculty. And you're thinking about business process, and that's not tech, that's business process. And so I think a lot of it depends on the context of where you used to be and what you're hired into and in that regard. So I don't disagree with you, but I think there's different variants on how that looks sometimes.
I couldn't
Yeah.
agree more. Now, interestingly, you had a very technical background. I'm kind of curious because I don't think we've had two CIOs on here who've had the same kind of path, right, to the top. It's always something different, and so I'm kind of curious. Can you share your origin story? What where you started, and kind of what led to this love for higher education, and what's that's you clearly have. So I kind of want to give people a chance to experience that and understand your where that passion comes from.
Sure. So as an undergrad, full disclosure, I went to DePauw. And so I had a double major in computer science and English literature. And at the time it was computer science because it was the 80s and that was the thing, right? And I enjoyed the logic of it, but I also really enjoyed English literature. So I was a classic liberal arts student. Um, I My first two jobs out of college were more technical because I was programming. My first job, I actually wrote assembler language code,
Yes.
if you can imagine. And I could do it, but I realized that I also had an opportunity to write some instructional manuals at the time. And I realized that I liked that too. And so I found when I had an opportunity to come back to work at DePauw, which that wasn't like a career path intentionally. It just happened that there was an opportunity to come back. And that's when I started to realize when I came back to work how it was really less about programming the computers that was interesting to me. It was more about enabling people to do interesting things with technology.
Yeah.
And, again, over the many years, the technology has evolved so quickly, especially in higher education, whether that's in instruction or the business process. And so I think it was fortunate for me that I happened to come back to work in higher education, because I think that's where I landed, and that's where I was meant to be. And so, being at a college where you're around students and you're around the faculty and understanding what they're trying to do really just kind of gives you grounding, and helps you understand where you're going. But I have a story from when I was an undergrad at in my I think it was my junior year, and we had I was a computer science major, mind you. Okay, so I was programming things in the computer lab. Okay.
That's right.
Okay, and I was also taking my other courses around it, and I had a English class, and one of my good friends who was also an English major took me to the new um, word processing lab that we had just put on campus, and she showed me how to use the word processor, because I wasn't learning that in computer science. I was learning, the English lit person told me how to use the word processor. But what struck me was I realized at that moment it transformed the way I could write by using a word processor. Suddenly it clicked better with the way I think, and I could write. And it dawned on me that this is what computers are really for. And it was a turning point for me, when I started thinking about what technology was. And in fact, I still have, when I came back to work here, if we were renovating that particular compute area, the building where it was, there was still a plaque on the wall that said Computer Word Processing Lab. I stole that sign and I have it in my office now, because it's
That's
a
awesome.
reminder to me of that turning point. So, so
That's
that's
fantastic.
my origin story, if you will.
I love it. I think that's, I think for a lot of people, we get into, I don't think I don't think your mind even goes to higher education when you start thinking of a career path in technology, right?
Yeah.
And which is unfortunate, because I think it's easy for everybody to kind of look back and think, the energy that's on campus is, for me, that's the thing that I really love. As you travel around and you experience different areas, different cultures, the energy of the place is always, really fascinating to me. And and from different college campuses, even the energy, of the student body that campus has, the second you step foot on it, how it's, just all of it, the feng shui, the architecture, the students, all of it. To me, that's always really fascinating and really enjoyable. And so I think it's a shame, and maybe it's just me that never thought that would be, a thing. But that's got to be fantastic to every day go in there and kind of be able to feed off that young, energy all the time, because it's just there. It's palpable most of the time. And you don't have that when you go to work for, some companies, especially now that people are being, work remotely so much. Now that energy is just what you have in your home office or whatever, wherever you happen to be working. So, do you find that to be the case for you? Is that energy something that kind of feeds you and and inspires you every day?
Yeah, absolutely. From all the obvious reasons that you've said, where because you walk out of my office out into the hallway and there are students there, right? So you're like, yes, this is awesome. And amazingly, they're always all the same age. It doesn't matter. So every year they're all the same age. So somehow you become ageless too.
There you go.
Feel. The other interesting thing when you talk about technology in higher education is people not thinking about it. I've found that it's a very interesting place to be in technology, because for one thing, you're balancing that consumerism of the way people are using technology
Yep.
with the corporate part of managing things like workflows and business process and data integrity and cybersecurity. And there's this balance between how open can and should it be, because it needs to be for people to be creative, and how locked down must it be in order to protect the assets and the institution and the privacy. And I think it's a challenge. It's a huge challenge. Some people would hate that challenge. I think it's interesting because you're always trying to find that sweet spot between how much lockdown can we have without detracting from the opportunity for people to be creative and explore. So to me, that's exciting. And the students and the faculty are always bringing new things in, going, hey, they walk in with their idea and say, we're doing this, or how can we do this? Make sure we can do this.
Yeah.
And so I think it's a little bit different than other areas where it might be like we're telling them what they can and can't do and how they should do things. So
Oh, absolutely. And you said something earlier that I thought was really great about and it's this simple perspective shift of empowering people, helping them to get, to be able to achieve whatever it is they're looking to do. And I think that a lot of CIOs are starting to, or have started to really adopt that mentality, that kind of, perspective shift to my job really is to empower and enable people to leverage technology in a safe way to accomplish the mission, whatever that may be. And so for higher education, that you do have that really unique challenge of doing that, on the because you have that same sort of corporate, structure, where you've got to keep those assets safe. And now you have a bajillion, devices from home that you somehow have to, give them access to a lot of stuff, and then kind of surf that wave of security and function, in a way that works for everybody. So yeah, I think you're right. That's a real challenge. And what is it about that you find kind of, enjoyable, that I think would drive, clearly we all know people that would drive absolutely batty, that they would hate it, they would quit, they were like, no, it's got to be this way. So what is it just a matter of being kind of intellectually curious, and that flexibility and liking the challenge, or is it that you've just really appreciate the situation for what it is and your role there to kind of to surf that wave?
yeah, I think for me personally, I think it's a little of both, probably leaning a lot towards just the curiosity of what's new that's coming and how can we fit this in and make it work. I will say the interesting thing though, you find, I think about that and I kind of expand it to how do you build a team who can embrace and address all of those pieces. And I think so. You have the CIO who has that sort of broad view across the waves and everything, but I have people on my team who really are not as thrilled about the fact that things are open. Okay, and that's the balance, right? You find as a leader, you make sure that you understand where your maybe stronger areas are. You find people who can complement that. You also be aware of where the gaps are, and you make sure you're filling those gaps with the team members too. And so, not everybody enjoys that balance,
That
but as long as you have a good balance of people on your team who they all kind of work together to do it, then it works out. But I don't know. To me, I think it's just that's exciting about it, because you're not doing the same thing every year. There's the you've got the cycle, you've got the academic cycle. So it's summertime here now. That doesn't mean we stop working. It just means the vibe on campus feels differently. So you get that sort of.
Yeah,
Someone talked about it as a reset refresh, right? You finish
nice.
the year, you spend the summer ramping back up, you get to start anew every fall,
I
and
like that.
that's kind of fun.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's fantastic. Well, I I kind of get the impression when it comes to hiring people on your team, that you don't necessarily hire kind of all the same type of people. It kind of sounds like, and I might be wrong, but it kind of sounds like you kind of enjoy that kind of diversity
Mhm.
in not just skill sets, but in perspective, right? So whereas a lot of people really enjoy having everybody very much focused in the same way. We all share the same vision. Let's move in that direction. Whereas others kind of like that the inherent conflict of, okay, duke it out. All right, we'll make a decision. You having people. So is that how you kind of
Yeah,
choose team members?
yeah, diversity on the team is very important. I mean, diversity of experience and mindset and background and and skill set is just, it's critical because again, we're a lean team. And when you look at a smaller organization like ours, everybody, we all say we want more people. We always say we don't have enough staff on our team, and that's always true. But when you have a really lean team, you have to have a group of people who are able to fill particular skills, but they also need to be able to work together with other people.
Yeah.
And they need to be flexible too. So we have everybody on our group, when we hire for people, we're hiring for some degree of depth of experience and expertise. I'm also looking at personally, what's their flexibility and their ability to be agile and learn beyond what they already know, and work with others to help kind of pull it all together. Because I think the leaner you are, the more diverse you need to be and the more flexible that you have to be, because you're going to have to work in tandem together with your teammates in order to accomplish what we need to do.
Yeah. I'm curious. I think one of the things that a lot of leaders, that we've talked to, all point out is like the making sure that the people they hire are intellectually curious, right? That they have this drive to learn, and finding those can often be challenging, but those are the ones that they want because they know that they will continue to grow with the organization. They'll move up and they'll be more engaged. It all makes perfect sense. But I'm kind of curious, do you find that the people applying for jobs at, in higher education, they tend to be more that way, that there's a higher percentage of people who just naturally are more intellectually curious because they, that whole higher education piece, is that the way you find it, or is that doesn't seem to be the case?
I think, my personal experience is we get applicants, people who apply for positions at institutions like ours are from everywhere. They're of all different types. So I can't say that the applicants are really of a particular type or not. I think that what I'm looking for though are people who have a combination of aptitude and agility.
Yeah.
So they have the aptitude to do what they already do, to learn more. I'm looking for agility. Can they adjust? Because our jobs are going to change. They're going to continue to change, and so that's important. If you're looking for somebody who wants to stay, and you want them to stay, you want them to be able to flex and grow, because you certainly don't want them to become sort of stuck because they choose not to change and they're not happy because things are changing. And you need them to change. The institution needs them to change. So those are the two things I look for. And I probably look for agility before I look for aptitude, because aptitude, if you just have a little bit of aptitude, you can learn things. It's that agility that's not always so easy to teach people if they don't already have it in their genes.
Very well said. I think that is kind of a really great way to go about it. And I tell you, I've had the best time talking with you today, and I thank you for coming on. But before we go, can you tell everybody where they can find out more about you and more about DePauw?
Sure. Thanks, Matthew. I really enjoy having the opportunity to talk with you this morning. So, yeah. Again, you can find more about DePauw at our website. It's www.depaw.edu. It's DEPAEAUW.edu. And I'm on LinkedIn. Just look me up at Carol Smith on LinkedIn. I'm happy if somebody wants to reach out, I'm happy to have a conversation.
Fantastic. Thanks, Carol. And until next time.
Thanks for listening to the Cyber Business Podcast. We'll see you again next time, and be sure to click subscribe to get future episodes.